Well, hello again, and wait, you want to do it?
Oh, yeah. Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of B-Sides. My name is Pastor Jon. I'm here with my buddy, Rusten.
What's up?
And typically this is the other way around, but this is one of those occasions where Rusten preached the text, so...
It's been so long, I forgot.
I get to ask the questions. I wasn't even here for this one, I don't think. I think I was gone.
I think you were gone, yeah.
Yeah, but I did listen to it online.
Yeah.
I always watch them online.
It was a really...
Later.
I remember really enjoying studying this passage.
Uh-huh. It's a
really fun passage. It's also really long.
Yeah.
It's really long. So I remember thinking there's going to be some B-side stuff. We actually already touched on some of it in the previous episode.
We did, yeah. Well, which we recorded 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We're stacking them. Okay, so we're still in Ephesus, okay? In the last episode, we had Paul dealing with what seems like the same kind of baptism confusion that Apollos had, which, as a total side note, there were different things going on with baptism then, different ideas. I was just thinking about how baptism today in churches can be so divisive.
Yeah, I know.
You know, in the last episode, I just kept thinking it really doesn't need to be that divisive. It really doesn't. Anyways, that's a whole different episode. I'm sure there's like 8 of you that really want us to go on that one. But okay, so we have Ephesus, we have the sons of Sceva, we have these Jewish itinerant exorcists casting out demons and books being burned and riots.
It's all coming back to me now. That's
a Meatloaf song. Is it?
It's all coming. Yes, I'm remembering this now. The syncretistic exorcists.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love the way Luke says it. Then some of the itinerant Jewish exorcists undertook to invoke the name of the Lord Jesus over those who had evil spirits. Okay, so
the Lord who Paul proclaims by his name, come out of him.
Yes. What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, you had these guys, and so this is the fun stuff you run into when you have to study a passage like really in depth for preaching. When you're like, there's no way I'm going to talk about that because I just don't have time. But one of the things that came up in my study was that it was not uncommon for, Jewish. This is the weird thing is that these were sons of a priest. Mm-hmm. This is where there's a lot of controversy in the commentators as to who were these guys. Were these Aaronic priests, or were they some sort of like weird hybrid? There's a lot of stories of priests in the history of God's people not actually being the people that are supposed to be because they're in rebellion, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that this is all happening during a state when Israel's in rebellion. So we don't exactly know who these priests were, what they were connected to, why they were itinerant exorcists, if they were, in fact, priests.
Yeah.
Why weren't they doing their priestly
stuff? Are they like on tour?
Yeah, like they're on tour. Like they're... Exorcism live tonight. Yeah, no. So these are guys who would go.
It's like the revivals,
and there's a high demand for guys like this.
Yeah.
In Ephesus, because this kind of stuff, this kind of like, you'll as we'll get into this passage more. There's lots of just, lots of open spiritual practices happening in Ephesus. Mm-hmm. There's the temple cult. As we see here in this passage, there's a whole bunch of people who had a whole bunch of magic books that were worth, thousands.
Not Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, magic books for spells, for like
demonic stuff.
Yeah. And
this isn't sleight of hand card tricks. And
I think that this is a good point to kind of emphasize what I think that these guys were doing. Magic is the manipulation of the created spiritual order in order to achieve pragmatic ends. That is what magic is. Magic acknowledges that there is something beyond the merely material.
Yeah.
And it seeks to tap into that through different kinds of incantations, wielding certain powers, whatever, And I think that the mechanism by which that happens is in itself demonic.
Yeah.
I think that I could see behind. It's like I imagine behind the scenes. It's like there's nothing about that potion that actually causes that end.
Yeah.
But it's almost like a demonic reality is feeding the script just to lead you along to give you the satisfaction that you were successful in manipulating the spiritual order.
That's very interesting.
That's how I think about magic.
Yeah,
because the demonic forces are invested in your belief that you can actually manipulate spiritual reality.
Yeah. Yep.
If you believe you are powerful in that way, then you will not look to God, who is over it all.
Right.
So it's an overturning of the proper way in which God's made everything. He's over it all. You appeal to Him. That's what prayer is. Prayer is appealing to God to change things.
Yeah.
And in
it's
hope.
a confession of weakness.
It's a confession of weakness and an appeal to Him because He's powerful.
Yeah.
And He has it all. Right? Magic is not an appeal. It's not a personal appeal. It is a mechanistic employment of certain technique to achieve material ends. Yeah. Spiritual and material ends. And I actually think this is where I think science has actually gone down the road of becoming more magic-like. Yeah. Science has become all about technique for the sake of achieving manipulated material ends. Yeah. And now we're starting to actually mess with spiritual realities. When you start messing with humanity and what humanity is at its core.
Like categories of male
and femaleness.
What's alive, what's not alive.
What's alive, not alive. You are dealing implicitly with spiritual realities. Yeah. And so I see science today as the new alchemy. I mean, we get the word chemistry from the word alchemy which was this like potion making for the sake of manipulating nature and spirit. So those two
things. What's really
things.
Interesting too is I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I had an interaction online very recently in which a person was kind of poo-pooing the idea of religious belief, but this is science.
Oh yeah.
And you have that same thing going on there where it's like, no, you don't understand that you have actually faith in this thing, right? We're both exercising our faith, but science has become this God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have and I think the interesting thing is that some person might say, so why aren't there more magical things happening more now? And a modernist would just say, well, that's because those primitive people that didn't know what the heck they were talking about. Yeah. Right? I'm more prone to actually believing that it's actually the other way around. It's that it's more bang for the demon's buck when he goes through science than exposing true spirituality in the world. Yeah. Because it's doubly distancing you from God.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is I think that it was C.S. Lewis in his Screw Tape Letters. I think that there's a point where Screw Tape Letters is like these. It's a satire, basically, of
this make-believe
correspondence between these two demons. One's a teacher demon, one's a apprentice demon.
Isn't Wormwood the apprentice?
Wormwood is the apprentice, and Screwtape is the affectionately yours Screwtape. Yeah, and Screwtape is telling Wormwood how to best tempt his what does he call him? His patient, or something like that, and lure him away from the enemy. And the enemy in this context is God. So but there's a point where he, like, some of the insights that he tells him is like, okay, you're not, it's actually beneficial for us if he doesn't know that spiritual darkness exists, right?
Yes.
We would happily have him not believe we exist, right? And in fact, I think in the preface,
that's the best case scenario.
In best case scenario, because then, and so if you can really land your patient to being a materialist, dogmatically, we can have our best effect upon him. Yes. Or in the flip side was, or you have him obsess about us. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think that we're living in a time where the obsession makes less sense. Yeah. But it still happens. Yeah. In terms of a demonic strategy. right? Because when you're living in an age where less people, like it's like you're going to like venture to look stupid in order to believe, be a Satanist or something like that?
Yeah.
Or are you going to be a materialist and be properly accepted in society?
Yeah.
And that's much easier to keep someone there without and have them not feel like they're belonging to some fringe weirdo group. Right?
Well, yeah, and if you you think about if you're talking online or talking with anybody and you're kind of spouting materialist propaganda lines, like everybody's going to congratulate you.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like nobody's going to push back on that.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you play it that way?
Yeah. And the modernist view is that we've been liberated from those archaic ways of thinking.
So one of the things that's really interesting, I think, you don't even have to get into like the very specific details, but this is consistent throughout Acts, is that there are very real, dark, demonic realities at work in people, in cities, in trades, in practices. Like that is whatever else you make of this text, that is for sure going on.
It's the warp and woof of reality. It's like that's what you see people running into a lot.
Yeah.
It's more clear in the in the New Testament because it's just there.
And I think that when you read Acts, right, and you read something like this, you can I think make the mistake of going, well, that must have been happening all of the time. Why doesn't it happen all the time now? Well, it wasn't necessarily happening all of the time in this way.
Yeah.
But it certainly is still happening now.
Yeah.
Like, as a pastor, I've had encounters and experiences with people where there were clearly demonic things going on with an individual. Like I witnessed changes in them that were not natural.
Yeah.
I witnessed behaviors that were clearly demonic. We're going into Good Friday and Easter, right? And we've talked about there's specific times during the year where it feels like there's an uptick in attack, whether that's discouragement or suffering or whatever it is. We've experienced some weird things, just in the last couple of weeks, things going on where you're like,
what in the world?
What in the world is this? So that there's still dark demonic things happening in this world. Yeah. And you really, you can't afford to neglect that reality.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the things that I emphasized that I think connects to that in the sermon was that Ephesus is strategic. We know it's strategic because from here, Paul, in 2 years of just preaching in this small little hall, was able to reach all of Asia Minor because of its location, because of its cultural cachet and influence. And so it's foolish to think that strategic place would not also be strategic for demonic realities.
Yeah.
So we're after the same. We want the same strategic ground.
Yes.
That they do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that means that there's conflict in those strategic places.
Good.
And so one of the things that I think, to your point, like you're a fool if you don't understand that.
Yeah.
You're a fool if you don't understand it and don't protect the strategic grounds. Okay? So for instance, I think that one of the reasons why demons go after, and we see this throughout Scripture, and Satan goes after rulers, is because they can be strategically damaging.
Right.
I think that there's a good reason why in Acts, why is it that Paul always ends up talking to a king or a ruler or a person in the jail?
Yeah.
It's like Luke is at least showing us this because he's showing us how the gospel is strategically taking over these positions.
Yeah.
But make it more practical, because I think that we should be thinking about this in terms of our leaders, but get super practical in it. It's really easy to see. In a household, the man who is the head of the household is a strategic target.
Right.
If you can get the man to be a slave to pornography, to whatever, like an anger problem, a drinking problem.
Laziness.
Yes, laziness.
Substance abuse.
The whole family will suffer in a way. I mean, not to say that there won't be suffering that is involved in other ways, but it is catastrophically different for the family destructive when the head of the household is given over to these things. And you can go and read studies about what it does to children and generations to not have a father in the house.
Yeah, education, crime, violence, substance abuse, the whole thing. It is, and that's not just like Christian studies. That's just go read the numbers. Like if dad's not in the house or dad is really unhealthy, all those things go through the roof.
That's the goal is destruction. The goal, the demonic, these demonic powers have is to destroy God's good order, His good plan.
Death.
Yes, death, destruction.
Yep.
So when you say that, like, we're a fool to not know this, we're also a fool to not be very particular in guarding what we know is strategic. Not that we shouldn't guard everything in our care, but like, if you're a man, know that you have a target on your back. And you're the head of your household, you have a target on your back. If you're a pastor, you have a target on your back. If you are in a position of leadership and influence, you have a target on your back. Like, because with you, either through, you can be a mouthpiece of deception,
right?
Or you can be a mouthpiece of truth. You can be an agent of destruction or an agent of flourishing. So there's, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I've had my wife and a close mentor friend have tried to remind me of that. Like the last couple of years have been. I was struggling with things before COVID insanity, right? And like that has continued in not necessarily the same intensity, but it's like sometimes you're so. Like I would get so focused on trying to figure out what's wrong and how can I deal with this and thinking about, diet and all this stuff with my body. And just like, you're wearing a target, Jon. And it's like, that doesn't mean that you should be irresponsible with all the other things, but you have to like be mindful that we have a real enemy. He is a liar. He's a murderer. And if you have any responsibility for the well-being of other people, you just wear a bigger target.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Yeah. And you have to, you don't have to be aware of that, but you also have to like counter that like through prayers and understanding. Well, how do you push back when there are clear, dark, demonic things happening?
Yeah, I know. It's, but all that to say, like, you need to be on guard.
Yeah.
Like you need, and you can only do that if you like have the worldview of these guys, like the Bible in your mind. Like it wasn't like they saw a demon behind every corner or whatever, but it was like they knew that was a real reality that they had to reckon with. And they also, the Christians knew that he was the defeated reality, but really a pestering one that would try to tear them down and make them unfruitful. Right? And so you have to be on guard. And like, I love that, Peter's like, resist him and he flees, right? But don't forget, he does prowl around like a lion.
He will come back.
He likes, like he's up to no good. But this story, we're just kind of like touching the surface. There's so much that happens here. We see different ways that this darkness creeps in. And there's two particular ways that I talked about in the sermon. One is that you have the sons of Sceva, who are trying to help, technically. Like, they're probably getting kickbacks too.
Yeah.
But they're a ministry of helping.
The itinerant exorcists.
The itinerant exorcists are trying to like help people that are demonically possessed. So they seem like, we should be rooting for them, right?
Yeah.
But really what we see in them is that they are coming at it from this perspective of magic.
Yeah.
They're coming at it from like incantations, what works, pragmatism.
Yeah.
And they are willing, it's kind of this weird thing where they're willing to use the one thing that actually works.
Yeah.
But they're not using it in faith.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, it says, I adjure you by the Jesus whom Paul proclaims, right?
Yeah.
And there's something really important here.
Yeah.
Not just about how you push back on darkness, right? But why doesn't it work for them?
Yeah.
And actually, not only does it not work for them,
they
get the snot beat out of them, and they run away naked, right?
I know, it makes you wonder, like, why were they naked when they ran away? Like, what happened to them? I just don't. I read that, I was like, what in the world? Demonic things. So, yeah. So why doesn't it work for them? Yeah. And I think that the problem here, one is like, there's ditches to fall into based on how you answer this, right? There's ditches. So,
Jesus was hung between two thieves.
So you have on the one side of the ditch, you have someone say, well, they didn't really believe it. Right? So all of the power goes into faith, right? Mm-hmm. On the other side, you have they were willing to do it. They were willing to just try. They were doing magic, basically, right? So, I think it's a because it's not like their faith wasn't strong. It's not like it wasn't like all based on their faith. Because if they had faith in something that was wrong, that wouldn't make a difference,
right?
Yeah. They had it was both problems. They didn't have faith in the one who would actually make the difference, right? They didn't actually have real faith in Christ.
Yeah,
they were basically selling Christ. As a solution rather than proclaiming Christ as Lord.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And that's different. And what they were, and I was emphasizing that what they were basically doing by saying that was they were lying about Jesus. They were saying that he accepts rivals because they had lots of different incantations. So in these exorcists, they found archaeological documents that include these books that these Jewish exorcists would use. And they include all kinds of incantations. Not ones that ones that honor pagan gods, ones that honor Yahweh, and then they have found actual books that refer to Jesus that were Jewish books, but include all these other syncretistic things as well. Right. And so they were basically willing to use whatever would work. And they saw that it's working with Paul. We'll try it out. We'll put it in our book. And so I think that their problem, the reason why it doesn't work, is that they're just syncretists. They're magicians. They're just trying to manipulate reality.
They're being pragmatic about it.
And what you necessarily do when you do that in their situation is you're not saying Christ is Lord. And so that's why it doesn't work, because Christ is not with those who accept rivals.
Yeah.
He's not with, if you accept rivals, you're not accepting him as Lord.
Yeah,
he'll be Lord or
by
definition
definition
to you. So, but it's really interesting that the demon's like, I know Jesus.
Yeah.
I know Paul.
Yeah.
I don't know you. And then he overpowers. All of them. Takes her reveals them as utterly weak by removing all their clothes.
The evil spirit leaped on them. Mastered all of them, and overpowered them. So they fled out of the house naked and wounded.
I know.
So now there's this other thing going on here. You have an evil spirit, which is like a non-material thing. Wounding. Jumping upon. Mastering these men.
I do think it's the evil spirit in the man doing that.
Okay, so the man's doing this is being done through.
I think that I read there were some debates about the language and how it could possibly work, and I think that I read a good case saying that it's the man who is like powered by this demon doing that.
Okay.
So you have, but still, it's like the idea there being that these group of guys have been totally mastered. They're the ones coming in to solve the problem, and they've been totally revealed as utterly weak. And then after that, it's such a powerful scene to see all these guys go, and then they must have gotten word out about how this demon knew who Jesus was. Because that's what inspires the next thing that happens, which is all these people come to faith. And then people end up burning their magic books. And it appears that the people who are coming to faith are people who are actually involved in the church already. It wasn't that they were complete new believers.
Also, many of those who were now believers came.
Yes.
Is he talking about how they came to be believers? Luke is talking about this after the fact, right?
It says, and this became known to all the residents of Ephesus, both Jews and Greeks, and fear fell upon them all, and the name of Lord Jesus was extolled. Also, many of those who were now believers came, confessing and divulging their practices. So it's what I read is that line is interpreted as there are many people who were already believers that when they saw this were like, okay, I don't want anything to do with this anymore, and they got rid of all their books.
Okay, gotcha.
Like they were like closet. They still had their like special practices and their magic books in their closets, kind of thing, and they confessed and divulged their practices.
Okay, so this is the other question.
Yeah.
Right, with the text that we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Before we hit record, that whether or not they became believers as a result of this, or they were already believers holding on to this stuff.
Yeah.
I grew up in a Baptist church. I know what a book burning is.
Oh, yeah. Right? CD burning.
Yes, it was. No, it was not. It was 8-track burning.
Oh, yeah.
And tape burning.
I definitely remember I was at a... so, yeah, this is like the... If you want to, like... I'm sure that this gets preached a lot at those fundamentalist Baptist churches where, like, the youth group... I mean, at least I was at a youth group where I remember a guy getting all of his CDs and burning them in a pile after youth group, and all of us were around him. He was like sitting down watching it burn, like this moment watching his CDs burn. And I remember being like, I really want that Blink-182 album.
Grab it before it hits the flame.
Because back then music was like expensive, like these magic books. Now you can just go like stream it anywhere. But like, like that kind of thing. So yeah, the question is, because we were talking about this before.
So what do you do with that? Do you take this as Luke's describing something? Is Luke prescribing a type of behavior for Christians? When is it right for Christians to cut ties with their past in a way like similar to this with burning things, like
burning things or cutting off things, like saying no mas to whatever,
like a Disney Plus membership.
Yeah, this is all we're recording this in the middle of the big everybody's canceling their Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And so I put in the margin notes of like my little notes, it's like, should I cancel my Disney Plus? That's a question that I imagine someone might actually think after reading this passage. So should you?
I think that's a good question. I think you'd have to have it first to cancel it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I don't have Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And I told John before, I was like, I don't even have Disney Plus. I can't cancel it. That's like my Christian virtue signal.
You know what you should do is you should get it, so then you can just cancel it.
Take that.
Yeah. Sticking it to the man.
So, but really, it's a good question. So I think that you, as we were talking beforehand, you made a good point. This is before we hit record. That these guys' relationship to these books was not like these are magic. These are like life-saving things.
Yeah.
And also worth a ton, right? I don't know that how much the worth comes into it, but like it was like
50,000 pieces of silver was the value that Luke records,
which is insane. Which is like
huge.
Yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head how much that meant in terms of wages, but it was a lot. But you have, this connection to these magic books. Mm-hmm. It seems a little bit more like I don't want to say like the kind of connection that you'd have with something you worship, okay, or something that is there is no either or. There's no like use for this.
There's no redeeming quality.
There's no redeeming quality
any of those resources.
In any of those resources. Yeah. And I think that on one side of things, I think it's fair to say that there are lots of things like that you should absolutely just chuck and be done with. Yeah. Like I can think of drug use, which is alchemy again.
Yeah.
A lot of times drug use is used to manipulate who we are, right? For the sake of something. Like there's certain kinds of drug use if you are, or pornography. Like burn that. Like get rid of that.
Yeah.
There's no redeeming use, right?
Right.
It gets a little more the need to discern when it's something like, your CD collection. Although sometimes the discerning might be obvious to you.
Yeah, right. There's something, as we're talking about this, I don't want to cut you off, but it's important to note that nobody told these people to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
The Spirit told them.
Right, but Paul didn't say, be a good Christian and burn all of your books.
Yeah.
They weren't commanded to do that. Yeah. This is something that they felt moved to do.
Yeah.
Conviction of the Holy Spirit. Yeah. So I think it's important to not read something into this that's not there, right? This was a choice that they made, right? And so I think what made me think about this, you were just kind of saying like you need to have discernment and wisdom, and there may be you could come out of a particular lifestyle and come to Christianity, and it might be really important for you to make a clear cut, a severing from that past to do something destructive or to get away with things that really were tying you to that past life, right? Yeah, that could be really important.
Yeah, I think, and
that would be an issue of discernment, not necessarily like a black and white, like.
Yeah, and to be honest, like I can't tell if this is this moment. Like we're talking about things we have to discern, and I think you have to talk about that kind of stuff. I can't tell if this moment here is a discern moment for them or like a clear, like, oh, we were living in sin.
Yeah.
Like because it says they confessed and divulged their practices. And I mean, we have directions in the Old Testament not to go to mediums, not to all these things.
Yeah.
But the difference to me would be this, okay? So if I had in my possession an ancient, one of these ancient books as like an interesting artifact.
An artifact,
right?
Yeah.
That's different from thinking, oh, the powers in this thing.
Yeah.
And if I have a problem, I know I can go to this book and consult it, and sometimes it actually works.
Yeah.
Like that's different.
Yeah.
Because like that's actually disobedience.
Yeah.
Because like, I mean, whereas some instances like the artifact, in your study or whatever is like kind of like this interesting. But like that's different. But I would say pornography doesn't fit in either of those things, right? Like,
correct.
So that's where
because it's objectively evil,
and there's and that's where the discerning thing gets different, where it's like, let's just say for instance, you're listening to Pearl Jam, right? Which we like Pearl Jam. Okay,
it's my favorite band.
So. But some, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying Pearl Jam as, like, a de facto, like, going to a necromancer would be wrong.
Yes.
Right? Like, that is wrong always.
Right.
But, like, enjoying... So, for instance, we know that Paul read the classic poets. Mm-hmm. Did he enjoy them? Was he allowed to enjoy them? Mm-hmm. Probably.
Yeah.
He read them.
Yeah.
It's like he's getting educated, and he probably, like, it's like, I'm really trying hard not to enjoy this. No, like God made these guys. There's a reason why they're enjoyable. And you get to, like, it's like the common grace thing comes out. Like, wow, God made these people that have to see these things, and it's super helpful. But I'm going to discern them because, I know they don't come from the same faith. And if the influence comes up in my life where it turns into something that's not right, then you discern it out of your life, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, like, when we talk about Disney Plus, etc., we might be looking at that kind of scenario, I think, where you're not like, there's no thou shalt not watch, what's that, the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Right? But like, I could see as a parent right now, I don't want to have Disney Plus accessible in my house because I don't want my kids to have the freshest, latest programs with the express goal in mind of normalizing deviant, rebellious sexuality to my kids when they're at their most formidable age. That doesn't seem wise.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's like, to me, it's like an obvious no.
Can we just go back to a talking mouse?
There's some people who are against that.
Yeah. Sure.
They're way ahead of their time. There are these fundamentalist Baptists that they're like, told you.
Yeah.
Told you years ago.
Yeah. They were kind of right, though.
They were kind of right. I know. So I actually have a lot. I find myself, as I grow older and hopefully wiser, looking at a lot of these people that I was like, oh, you're just, being like, maybe they were a little legalistic, but maybe there was some wisdom that came out legalistic.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a way we can get the wisdom without the legalism.
Yeah.
And pray that the Spirit shows us what we ought to do.
Yeah.
Because like, I just don't want to even, I don't want them to have my money.
Yeah.
Too.
Right. So let's, I think we kind of close this thing up here.
Yeah.
So to kind of bring those things, threads together to tie the knot.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about this, there seems to be some categories, some basic categories. There are some things that are clearly evil that you need to essentially burn. You need to get rid of, right? Yep. So you gave an example of sexually explicit materials. There are individuals who collect rare, pornography, that is worth a lot of money. And if that was you and you became a Christian, right, and you have a big collection, you're not selling that to recoup the money, you would burn that, right? Yeah. Or for example, let's say you ran into a bunch of money and you just bought a boatload of heroin.
Yeah.
And then you got saved. You're you would.
I'm going to sell these off to people.
Yeah, and tie it to the church.
Yeah. What they're simultaneously doing when they burn it is they're cutting off the influence of that device. Yeah. They're cutting off the influence of those magic books. They don't want anybody else to have it either.
They don't want anyone else to have it either, right?
Good, yeah.
So there's things that are in that category, which are black and white, clearly wrong. You've got to get rid of this, right? Yeah. Then there's other things where you have to use discernment and be honest about where you're at as an individual. So, for example, I know there were seasons in life where I had to not listen to kinds of certain music, and now I'm not in that season of life, and it doesn't bother me, affect me the same way. But you have to discern. Okay, do I just need to? Is this a me thing that I need to distance myself from this material resource, whatever it is? And then what are things that they're not that black and white, and they're like the poets that Paul read, where they're not Christian. It's not all true. But there is a common grace in which you're able to have enjoyment of it and even benefit from it, and also have the maturity to filter out and screen out those things which are harmful and not good. Is that
totally?
Are those fair categories to think about?
I think they are fair categories. I think that one of the things that I have found personally. This is just an odd tangent in some ways, and I know we got to close it up here. But the nearer you are to the truth, or somebody who appears to be nearer to the truth, who is often a way that is twisted, those are the ones that are actually the most deceptive. It makes sense. So for instance, I've found that personally, because if the whole point of to tie it back even further to spiritual darkness. Right?
Yeah.
Satan's a good deceiver. He deceives by using twisted truth.
Right.
Right? If what was going on here was there's a spiritual darkness behind these things, right? And you're considering I have a target. You have a target in your back. There's different things that are trying to capture your attention, distract you, deceive you, and that some of the ways this happens is through things that you have to discern. Right? One of the things that I've noticed is that, so for instance, you mentioned music, and this is why I'm thinking about this. It was the musicians who were the most thoughtful, smart, and ostensibly Christian, who then went and increasingly got more and more and more deconstruction-y, but wasn't really clear until the very end that they were actually walking away from the faith. It was those last couple albums before they made it clear that were actually maybe the more damaging ones to me. In terms of I didn't realize what I was doing by taking them in, but I was basically walking down the path of deconstruction with this person and thinking like them. Yeah. And then when I saw
We're thinking of the same artist, aren't we?
Yeah, probably. Dave is on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
and the same album.
Yeah, I mean, there are things I just remember thinking if I had a moment in my young adult life where I actually almost questioned my faith to the point of wondering, what's the point? Yeah. It was the person holding my hand was Dave Bazan. Yeah. And in ways that was that looking back now, I'm oh, I have had to cut some of that out, mostly just because it breaks my heart to hear this guy who's walked away from the faith. Yeah. But at the other side of things, I can actually go back and listen and enjoy this guy, a lot of that now, without feeling that connection. But in the thick of it, it was It was not good.
Right. Yeah.
So,
totally.
Right on. Well,
right on.
There's a lot more here still. We didn't even talk about economics, but we've talked about that in previous episodes, so I feel good.
I think we're
all
good.
right. Well, thanks for hanging around with us again. Until next time, trust Christ, go to church, and love your neighbor. See you guys.
See ya.